Hello, and welcome to Lila's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll join Lyla as she travels with her best friends to the enchanting island of St. Vincent. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. The morning sun was already warm when Lyla stepped out onto the deck of the small cruise ship, her coffee cup cradled in both hands. The vessel had anchored overnight in Kingstown Harbor, and now St. Vincent spread out before her. Green mountains rising sharply from the coast, the town clustered around the waterfront, everything bathed in the clear, brilliant light of a February morning in the Caribbean. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Marina emerging from below deck, still in her pajamas, her highlight-streaked hair pulled into a messy bun. "You're up early," Marina said, stifling a yawn. "Couldn't sleep," Lyla said. "Too excited. I love the vibe when we're all here together." "I know," Marina said, joining her at the railing. They stood together, looking out at the island. The friendship between the five of them, Lyla, Marina, Beth, Claire, and Josie, went back to college days and shared apartments and late-night conversations that had solved the world's problems. Life had scattered them across different cities, different careers, different paths. But the bond had remained, and these days the glue were these meetups, when they each took turns choosing an amazing global location. This one was Lyla's choice. A week sailing through the Caribbean on a small ship, just the five of them. Everyone had immediately said yes. "Coffee?" Lyla asked. "Please, I'll go wake the others. We're supposed to meet our driver at 9, right?" That's what the captain said, a man named Winston with an SUV. By the time they'd all gathered for breakfast on deck, the morning had taken on that easy, comfortable rhythm that comes when old friends reunite. Beth was telling a story about her teenage daughter's latest drama. Claire was planning their route for the day with a guidebook open in her lap. And Josie was taking photos of everything. The harbor, the mountains, the breakfast spread, all of them laughing at her table. "I'm documenting," Josie insisted. 20 years from now, we'll want to remember this." 20 years from now, we'll be doing this again," Marina said firmly. "This needs to become a tradition." They took a tender boat to shore. All five of them squeezed onto the small vessel with their day bags and sun hats. The water in the harbor was remarkably clear, and Lyla could see fish swimming below, darting between moorings and shadows. Winston was waiting for them at the dock, exactly as promised. He was a tall man with a warm smile, dressed in cargo shorts and a bright floral shirt, leaning against a white SUV. "Good morning, ladies," he called out as they approached. "You must be my tour for today. I'm Winston, and I'll be your guide around our beautiful island." They introduced themselves, shaking hands, and piled into the SUV. It was spacious enough for all of them, though there was good-natured arguing about who would sit where. Eventually, they sorted themselves out. Claire in the front passenger seat with her guidebook, the other four in the back rows. "So," Winston said as he started the engine, "I have a route plan that will show you the best of St. Vincent. We'll go up into the mountains, see some beautiful views, visit a botanical garden, stop at a black sand beach, And if we have time, maybe see a waterfall. Sound good? A chorus of agreement came from his passengers. Excellent. Now, everyone comfortable? Because these mountain roads, they're not like your highways at home. Lots of curves, lots of hills. But don't worry, I've been driving them my whole life. He navigated out of Kingstown with practiced ease, pointing out landmarks as they went. The market building, the cathedral, government buildings with colonial architecture. The town was busy with morning activity. People walking to work, vendors setting up stalls, school children in uniforms walking in groups. Once they left the town, the road began to climb almost immediately. Winston hadn't been exaggerating about the curves. The road wound back and forth up the mountainside, each turn revealing new views. On one side, the ocean spread out below them, impossibly blue. On the other side, the green slopes of the interior rose up, covered in vegetation so lush it almost looked unreal. St. Vincent is very mountainous, Winston explained. We have La Soufriere volcano right in the middle of the island. She's active, erupted most recently in 2021. But don't worry, she's quiet now. Very beautiful hiking if you're interested, but that's a full day trip. The vegetation is incredible, Beth said, leaning toward the window. Everything is so green. We get plenty of rain, Winston said with a laugh. Keeps everything growing. We have banana plantations all over the island. You'll see them as we drive. Bananas, arrowroot, coconuts. Agriculture is very important here. They passed through small villages clinging to the hillsides, clusters of brightly painted houses with gardens full of tropical plants. Children played in yards, chickens wandered freely, and people sat on porches, waving as the SUV passed. Winston waved back at everyone, sometimes calling out greetings. Do you know all these people? Claire asked. Most of them, Winston said. It's a small island. Everybody knows everybody. That's how we like it. The road continued to climb, and the views became more spectacular. At one hairpin turn, Winston pulled over at a small overlook. Photo opportunity, he announced. You'll want pictures of this. They all climbed out, and Lyla understood immediately why he'd stopped. The view was breathtaking. The coastline stretched out far below. The Caribbean Sea, a gradient of blues from pale turquoise near shore to deep sapphire farther out. Mountains rolled away into the distance, and clouds cast moving shadows across the landscape. Josie immediately began taking photos, but the others simply stood, taking it in. A warm breeze moved through the trees around them, carrying the scent of flowers and green growing things. It's so peaceful up here, Marina said quietly. Different from the beach, Winston agreed. Both beautiful, but in different ways. The mountains have their own magic. Back in the SUV, they continued higher. They passed banana plantations, the plants with their huge leaves creating walls of green along the road, bunches of bananas covered in blue protective bags. The bags protect the fruit from birds and insects, Winston explained. Bananas are big business here. We export them all over. They reached the Montreal Gardens, a botanical garden perched high in the mountains. Winston parked in a small lot, and they followed him along paths that wound through the garden. The plant life was extraordinary. Palms and ferns, orchids and heliconias, plants with leaves bigger than dinner plates, flowers in colors Lyla couldn't name. "This garden has plants from all over the Caribbean and beyond," Winston said. "Some of these specimens are over 100 years old." They walked slowly, stopping often to admire particular plants or to photograph flowers. A hummingbird appeared, hovering near a red bloom, its wings a blur of motion. Everyone stopped to watch, enchanted. "Does anyone else feel like we've stepped into a nature documentary?" Beth whispered, and they all laughed. The garden included some walking trails through the forest, and they followed one for a while, the canopy closing over them, creating a green twilight. The sounds here were different: bird calls, rustling leaves, the occasional crack of a branch. It felt primordial, ancient, untouched. Eventually, they made their way back to the SUV, and Winston began the winding descent down the other side of the mountain. This route took them along the leeward coast, where the landscape was slightly drier, the vegetation less dense. "We're heading to a black sand beach," Winston said. "It's volcanic sand. Comes from the lava flows when the volcano erupts. Very dramatic, very beautiful. Not many tourists know about this one." The road brought them down to sea level, and soon they were driving along the coast. The water here was rougher than in the harbor, waves breaking against rocky shores. They passed through another small village, and then Winston turned onto a narrower road that led to a beach. The sand was indeed black, a deep, glossy black that contrasted strikingly with the blue-green water and the white foam of the breaking waves. The beach was quiet, with only a few local families scattered along its length. Palms and sea grape trees provided shade at the back of the beach. "This is amazing," Claire said as they all climbed out. "I've never seen black sand before." "Take off your shoes and walk on it," Winston suggested. "But be careful. In the sun, it can get very hot." They slipped off their sandals and walked across the sand toward the water. It was hot underfoot, but not unbearably so, and the texture was finer than regular beach sand, almost silky. At the water's edge, where the waves kept it wet, it was pleasantly cool. The 5 friends walked along the beach together, sometimes talking, sometimes quiet, simply enjoying being together in this beautiful place. The waves were energetic here, rolling in with force, and the sound of them was constant and powerful. "Remember that summer we all went to Cape Cod?" Josie said suddenly, "when Marina convinced us to go swimming at midnight." "We were so young," Marina said, laughing, "and so fearless, or maybe just foolish." "The best kind of foolish," Beth said. "I miss that version of us sometimes." "I don't know," Lyla said. "I think I like this version better. We're wiser now. We appreciate things more. And we can afford better vacations," Claire added, making them all laugh. They found a spot in the shade and sat down, watching the ocean. Winston had stayed with the SUV, giving them space, and Lyla was grateful for his discretion. These moments with her friends were precious, and she wanted to savor them. A local boy ran past, flying a kite that dipped and soared in the wind. His laughter carried across the beach, pure and joyful. Further down the shore, a couple walked hand in hand, occasionally stopping to pick up shells. "I needed this," Marina said softly. "Work has been so intense lately, I forgot what it felt like to just be somewhere beautiful with people I love." "That's exactly why we're here," Claire said, reaching over to squeeze her hand, "to remember what matters." They sat for a long while, talking and laughing, catching up on the details of each other's lives that didn't fit into emails and phone calls. It made Lyla think about what came next in her life. The conversations flowed easily, the way they always had. There were no awkward silences, no need to fill every pause with words. They'd known each other long enough that quiet was comfortable too. Eventually, Winston wandered over. "Whenever you ladies are ready, we can continue. I thought we might stop for lunch at a local place I know. Very good fish. Nothing fancy, but authentic Vincentian food." They gathered their things and followed him back to the SUV. The black sand clung to their feet, and they spent a few minutes brushing it off before climbing in, laughing at the impossibility of getting it all off. Winston drove them to a small restaurant perched on a hillside overlooking the ocean. It was an open-air place with a roof but no walls, just tables and chairs and a kitchen at the back. The owner greeted Winston like an old friend, and soon they were all seated at a large table with cold drinks and menus written on a chalkboard. "Get the fish and fungi," Winston recommended. "Trust me." They did, and when the food arrived, it was delicious. Fresh fish grilled with herbs and spices, served alongside fungi, a cornmeal and okra dish that was savory and comforting. There were fried plantains, too, and a cabbage salad dressed simply with lime. "This is incredible," Beth said. "Why doesn't every meal taste like this?" The owner, a woman named Grace with a wide smile and quick laugh, was pleased by their enthusiasm. "You ladies enjoying St. Vincent?" "It's beautiful," Marina said. "We're having the most wonderful day." "Good, good. You come back any time." "And you," she said, pointing at Winston, "you better bring more nice people like this." "Always do, Grace. You know that." After lunch, Winston took them to see a waterfall tucked away in a valley. They had to hike a short distance down a muddy trail, but the waterfall was worth it. Water cascading down a rock face into a clear pool surrounded by ferns and tropical plants. The spray created rainbows in the afternoon light, and the sound of the falling water echoed through the valley. They stood at the edge of the pool, marveling at the natural beauty. A few local children were swimming in the pool, diving from rocks and splashing each other, their laughter mixing with the sound of the waterfall. "Anyone want to swim?" Josie asked, but the others shook their heads. "I'm happy just watching," Lyla said, and the others agreed. They sat on rocks near the pool, cooling their feet in the clear water, talking about nothing in particular and everything at once. Time seemed to slow down here, in this green valley with its falling water and laughing children, surrounded by her oldest friends. Eventually, as the afternoon began to tip toward evening, Winston led them back to the SUV. "We should start heading back," he said, "but we'll take the scenic route, show you a bit more of the coast." The drive back was leisurely, Winston pointing out various sights, a historic plantation house, a small church with a colorful facade, a bay where sea turtles were known to nest. The light was changing now, taking on that golden quality of late afternoon, and everything seemed to glow. They passed through Kingstown again, the town settling into its evening rhythm. People were closing shops, students were walking home from school, the market was winding down for the day. Winston dropped them back at the dock where they'd been picked up that morning. "Thank you for showing us your island," Claire said, speaking for all of them. "It's been a perfect day." "My pleasure," Winston said, his warm smile genuine. You ladies have a wonderful rest of your trip, and remember, Street, Vincent, is always here, waiting for you to come back." They said their goodbyes, took a final photo with Winston, and then watched as he drove away with a wave. The tender was waiting to take them back to the ship, but none of them moved toward it immediately. "Should we get dinner on the ship or go into town?" Beth asked. "Ship," Marina said. "I want to sit on the deck with all of you and a bottle of wine and watch the sunset." "Perfect plan," Josie agreed. Back on the ship, they did exactly that. They gathered on the deck with wine and cheese, watching as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. The sky turned from blue to gold to pink, the colors reflecting off the water in the harbor. They talked about the day, the views from the mountains, the black sand beach, Grace's restaurant, the waterfall. But mostly they talked about how good it felt to be together, how grateful they were for friendships that had lasted through decades in distance, through marriages and divorces, through career changes and life upheavals. "To us," Claire said, raising her glass, "to friendship that endures." "To more trips like this," Marina added. "To not waiting another 7 years to do this again," Beth said. They clinked glasses, and Lyla felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the wine and everything to do with the women around her. The sun touched the horizon, and the light deepened to orange and purple. The mountains of St. Vincent were silhouettes now, dark shapes against the glowing sky. Lights began to twinkle on in the town, and the harbor settled into its evening calm. The ship would sail in the morning, taking them to the next island on their itinerary. But for now, they were here, anchored in this beautiful harbor, surrounded by mountains and ocean, held by friendship and shared history. "What a day," Lyla said softly, and the others murmured their agreement. They sat together as the stars began to emerge, as the sky deepened from purple to indigo, as the last light faded from the western horizon. The wine was finished, the cheese reduced to crumbs, but none of them wanted to move, to break the spell of the evening. Music drifted up from somewhere in town. Caribbean rhythms, a steel drum, voices raised in song. The sound carried across the water, mixing with the gentle lap of waves against the hull, creating a lullaby of sorts. Marina leaned back in her chair with a contented sigh. "I don't want this to end." "It doesn't have to," Josie said. "When we go home, we'll start planning the next trip." "Deal," Beth said. Lyla looked around at her friends. These women who had known her at her best and worst, who had celebrated her triumphs and held her through her sorrows, who had remained constant through all the changes and challenges of life. She felt overwhelmingly grateful for them, for this trip, for this perfect day on a beautiful island. The night deepened around them, warm and gentle. The ship rocked slightly on its anchor, a soothing motion. From the town, the music continued, and occasionally laughter or voices would carry across the water. They talked on into the night, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic, occasionally falling into comfortable silence before picking up again. Stories from their shared past, plans for the future, observations about the present moment. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and they all stopped to watch it, making silent wishes. The moment felt charged with possibility, with the magic of being exactly where they were supposed to be, with exactly who they were supposed to be with. Eventually, one by one, they began to drift toward their cabins. Hugs and goodnights, promises to meet for breakfast, plans for the next island. But Lyla lingered on deck a bit longer, not quite ready to let go of the day. She stood at the railing, looking out at St. Vincent one last time. The mountains were barely visible now, just darker shapes against the night sky. The town lights glowed warmly, and the water reflected them in shimmering paths across the harbor. She thought about the day, the winding mountain roads, the stunning views, the black sand beach, the waterfall, Grace's restaurant, Winston's warmth and knowledge. But mostly she thought about her friends, about the gift of their continued presence in her life, about the way they could pick up right where they'd left off, as if no time had passed at all. The friendship they shared was like the island itself, enduring, beautiful, worth the journey to reach it. And like St. Vincent, with its green mountains and volcanic beaches, their friendship had its own kind of geography, shaped by time and experience, weathered by life's storms, but still strong, still vital, still offering shelter and joy. The night was complete now, the stars brilliant overhead, the Milky Way a faint smear across the darkness. The harbor was quiet except for the gentle sounds of water and the distant music from shore. The ship creaked softly, settling on its anchor. Lyla took one final deep breath of the Caribbean night air. Salt and flowers, warmth and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new islands to explore. But tonight, this moment, was perfect exactly as it was. She turned from the railing and made her way below deck, her heart full, her spirit light, grateful for friendship and travel and the chance to experience beauty in good company.